that if you're on the same network, I don't have access to your data if I'm not authorized. You don't have access to my data if you're not authorized.
Okay. So if I deny the existence of a particular set of information, will that really fall under confidentiality?
Could you repeat?
If I denied the existence of a particular set of data, will that fall under confidentiality?
Yeah, depending on, okay, like let's say if a system is divided into like user groups where we have admins and regular users, certain information can be withheld from the lower level users and accessible to the high level users. So yeah.
Okay, so I presume low level user, you mean regular users?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what else? What else did we look at? Bashir Mujtaba.
Hi, so we also just to point out further on the CIA aspects of the information systems. So I remember you asking us to discuss between the differences, like how can we have systems which can be just confidential or just have like availability, like for example just have integrity, or you were asking a few questions and we were discussing a few things on that. Like you have or examples of systems you can have which can like enforce integrity and
Okay, fair enough. Yes, Raj Gami.
I remember, first of all, on Bashir's point, I remember discussing the levels of CIA, whereby every system cannot have equal levels of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They all have their different standards depending on the system itself. And I also remember strong emphasis on the goals of security mechanisms, which are prevention, detection, and recovery and restoration.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Yes, Isaac.
Mechanism.
We also looked at security concepts, which we looked at an attack, a threat, and a vulnerability. So we were able to distinguish between the three. And we said an attack is an actual exploitation of a vulnerability in an asset. A threat is the potential that vulnerability. And a vulnerability is an existing weakness, a point of weakness in a system.
Okay, or a particular asset. Anything else? Anything else we've left?
Yes.
Lesuk, Jaden. Yes, we can. Yes. Not prevention. Okay. We are getting to that. Yes, Anthony. Kivai.
So, I remember one of the things we discussed were mechanisms and policies, and we said policy mechanisms are used to implement policies that are already drafted for the for security policies.
Okay. So one is a definition document. The other one is an enforcement procedure or tool or device. Yes, Julie.
We also mentioned attack surfaces, and we had 4.
Okay.
the network attack surface, software attack surface, human attack surface, and the hardware attack surface. On top of that, we mentioned that the human attack surface is the weakest link in an InfoSec. Yeah.
Okay. In most cases. Anything else I've left out? Yes, Isaac.
We also looked at the goals of a security mechanism, now that which enforces the policies. And we said we gave 3. One was prevention, detection, recovery, and restoration.
Okay.
So on prevention, we said we are preventing attackers from violating a security policy.
Okay.
And in detection, we are detecting attackers violating a particular security policy.
Okay.
And recovery and restoration is we're stopping an attack, assessing and repairing the damage. So we are trying to see if we can recover and restore what was affected during an attack.
Okay, fair point. Just as Raj mentioned. Yes, Julie.
Okay, on that point, concerning the goals of a security mechanism, we had an argument that we didn't finish up on the previous class.
Yes.
About car alarm system, whether it's
okay, then we can officially get to this car alarm system. Yes, go on. Please go on.
Yeah, the argument was whether it's a prevention or detection mechanism.
Okay. Yes, so what's your point of view? So we can get to the discussion now. So is it a preventive, detective, restorative system or mechanism, and why? Yes, Isaac. Sorry, go on. Yes, Stacy.
I think a car alarm system is a detection measure.
Okay, why is that?
A preventive measure is where you put in to bar the attack from happening.
Yes.
That won't give a surface for the attack from happening. But in the case of a car alarm, if someone was trying to break into the car, even if the alarm was to go off, they'd still be able to complete whatever they were doing. They'd be able to access the vehicle. They'd be able to steal whatever they're or tamper with whatever they're doing.
Okay.
But it would just be a notification to the owner that my car is being tampered with. So that's why I think it's a detection and not prevention measure.
Assuming the owner can hear
yes,
the alarm.
Assuming the owner can hear the alarm.
Okay, good point. Good point. Yes, what else? Any other take? Yes, Anthony. Anthony Kivai.
So I think it's a preventive mechanism.
Okay.
Because as like people said, how it raises alarm, but it doesn't really bar anyone from accessing it. But the whole point of the alarm is to make so if someone is notified, they should come and prevent the person from accessing it. So it's like the first preventive mechanism it does is the whole alarm, which is supposed to, I think one of the things is that it's supposed to like scare the person or make the person think twice. So prevent that's the first preventive measure. Then the second preventive measure I think it does is alert someone, so someone should prevent that other person from accessing the car, driving it away or something like that.
Okay.
So I still think it's a preventive mechanism.
Okay. Okay. Fair point as well. Yes, Amani. Amani Newton.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
So my point is, I think the alarm is a detection mechanism.
Okay.
Let's try and move away. Like let's go to a bank. Has a has an alarm system.
Okay.
But the alarm system, a bank does not point the money, but the alarm is to alert the them to a car. A car, you can store it in your garage and lock it. Person breaks into your garage and tries to take it to sell. It will person who is
Okay. That's a good point, but let me ask you that. The two comparisons, it's a good analogy. The only difference is you can take away the car as a whole, but you cannot take the bank as a whole, as a unit. Yes. So.
Yes. But.
Yes, I get what you're saying. I'm not saying that your thinking is wrong. I'm just thinking that it's a bit off in that sense. But I will explain my point of view in a few minutes. Let's get a few more points of views, perspectives. Yes, Ian.
Hello.
Okay. In my opinion, it satisfies both a preventive mechanism and a detection mechanism, because the presence of the car alarm will deter, say, a thief. If I walk up to a car and I notice the alarm light is blinking, I will think twice about interfering with the vehicle. But in the case that that does not stop me, then it serves as a detection measure, where if I break open the window, the alarm goes off and the owner might be able to be alerted that someone is actually interfering with this vehicle.
Right. Okay. Fair point. Ngugi Macharia.
So yeah, still on the side of detection. First of all, it's a whole system in itself employed to work for the car. So it not only detects but also informs, or rather, it advertises that something is going on. Because I'd imagine, say, if we go back to the analogy that Amani gave, in a bank, if you have the alarm systems, but they're also doors. So if there will be an alarm system and no door, then the alarm system wouldn't be of help like at all. It will just be like you're screaming, but you still go and get the money and get out. You see, but it should have informed other people. It should have detected that you passed there. So in a car, say even if the car raises an alarm and say the key is inside, there's no cutout, you're ready to go with the car, you see. But if even if it didn't have if it didn't have an alarm and the steering was locked and there's a cutout, you wouldn't do anything with the car. I'm trying to think that prevention measures are they really don't care if you're there. They just block you completely from trying to access. Because if you go back to the bank thing, even if you did, even if the alarm wasn't there, the door would have still barred you from so like it would have totally prevented you from doing it. But the alarm system now informs people that you're actually trying. So I don't think it's a preventive, it's just a detective measure and inform measure.
All right. Rebecca Mbula.
I think it's purely detection because it's the presence of the alarm system wouldn't stop someone from attempting to steal your car, but if they do certain actions, let's say try and open the door without your knowledge, they'll definitely it'll inform you. So it's basically it's helps you to detect an intruder. But if they try something like maybe picking your lock or a way that the system has not designed, it won't be able to detect it. So it definitely doesn't prevent. I think it's just detection.
Okay. Magak, Nicholas.
Yeah. With the whole alarm system as a whole, I want to think of it as remember how you described the CIA not not being able to. There's something you have to compromise somewhere, right?
Yes, yes.
So in the area of let's say prevention,
yes,
it won't really focus its its strengths there. Let's say you parked your car in a parking lot, right? And the thief was watching you park the car. You press the button to lock the car, and obviously the alarm lights flash. So if it wasn't someone who was prepared for an alarm, to walk away, because that's an issue they wouldn't want to deal with. But let's say we get into detection, right? So the guy might be prepared to steal the car as fast as possible, even though the alarm will go off. And let's say you're close enough in a coffee shop or something, and you hear the alarm, and you can see the car is being driven away. So it has helped you detect your car is being stolen. But then there's also alarms that are wired into the computer of the car, the ECU, that will help you either turn off the car with your phone or just locate the car eventually.
I'll give you a notification that your car is not where you last left it or where it's meant to be.
I mean, like the detection, you will know the car is missing because of the detection, with the sound and everything. So you can use your phone, right? Because there are smarter systems these days. And you can see the car has been driven away, and through the phone you can either shut off the car or locate where the car is going to.
Okay, fair point. So I can see hands from previous speakers. I'm not sure whether you forgot to lower your hands or you still have something to say. Anthony Kivai?
Oh, there's something I wanted to add to my answer. I think there's a difference. For me, I think there's a difference between detection and notification. Because if I think a detection mechanism has some sense of like, I'm allowing this to happen so that I can see who is doing this. So in that case, I think a security camera in the car would be more of a detective mechanism. But in this case, an alarm, like the reason it's an alarm, I think the first thing is prevents that other, like it's supposed to make that other person think twice. And now that aspect of notifying people is also a preventive mechanism. I think the difference between there's a difference between notifying another person and the detection. And I think
Okay. Fair point. Yes, Rebecca.
Sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. I wasn't. Yeah.
Yes, Stacy.
I wanted to add, or rather, I wanted to comment on a point. I was thinking that the alarm system, if we look at it as a preventive measure, in security we'd say a preventive measure would prevent an attack. Yes.
So the idea is the attack will not take place.
Yes,
if you get some malicious connection, then you drop the connection, then you're basically preventing. Okay, go on.
Yes, like there's a firewall, so you completely can't go through the firewall. That would be a preventive measure of an attack. But I'm thinking if there's an alarm, if it is possible for someone to be deterred by noticing that there's an alarm, but they can still go forward and access the vehicle. They can still go forward and tamper with the vehicle. So I don't think the alarm being there is preventing the attack from happening. And now when the attack happens is when the alarm rings, which is why I think it's detection. And Anthony had talked about there's a difference between detection and notification. But looking at how we've classified these measures, we talked about preventive, detection, and recovery and restoration. Looking at how the CAR system works and how we've described what detection would be, I think a CAR alarm system is a detective measure just to detect when an attack is happening.
Okay. Something to add is you will always have notifications across all these mechanisms. Yeah? You will have some sort of notifications. Yes, Raj.
Another thing, sir, we might want to put in consideration is the sensitivity of certain alarms, because the alarms that buzz off immediately, someone even like tries to shake the car, or like even try to pull the door of the car. There are certain alarms that have lowered sensitivity such that that's when the alarm goes off. So I think that's where the line is into preventive or detective measure, because when it's really sensitive, it throws off as a prevention, because the fear of being caught is what drives the thief away. However, the alarm goes off when the door opens. That's more of a detect when that's separating the two mechanisms.
Okay, fair. They will be part of the prevention, in that the system is not working. It's always inevitable that you will end up having false positives and false negatives. Yeah. Yes, Amani.
For me, for a attack to be a preventive measure, it must be linked up or incorporated with other preventive measures like cut out and what have you. To actually prevent this.
Okay, it's a fair point. It's open for discussion because we haven't defined the scope of the alarm system, so we are just thinking from a security point of view. So that is also a good observation. Yeah. Anything else we've left out? Any burning perspective? Yes, Anton.
My last perspective is that if you say it can be a preventive mechanism, because it does not prevent like the person from actually coming into the car. I think that's an issue with now the performance of the like that
mechanism.
Preventive mechanism. Preventive mechanism. And yeah, so someone cannot just open the what's it called, the knob or something. But if someone could just barge through the door, like yeah, they would still get in. But it doesn't take from the fact that me putting locks was a preventive mechanism. Yeah, so that's my last perspective.
Okay. Yes, Amani.
Respond to Anthony.
Sorry?
I'm asking if this is response to Anthony, if you take an alarm as a prevent by having an alarm in itself, it will now depend on the person. If the door or the break into your house because you by to get the house, I stop doing the act. But if I look at the alarm and I don't really hear about what it can, the alarm it will raise, then I don't think it's
Okay. So all the perspectives have good reasoning behind it, and I think all points of view are objective. Now, when you look at the alarm system, from the point of view that it's there to probably deter thieves or potential thieves, and you look at the element of stealing, and what fuels the element of stealing is the ability to do it with stealth, then you can think of the alarm system as a preventive measure, because the alarm will reduce that element of stealth and most likely deter a person from stealing the car. Yeah? Now, it could also be a detective measure if you don't think of just stealing the car, but stealing or breaking into the car, so can be stealing any part of the car, then that will be a detective as well. You could think of it from that point of view. Reason measure, we have users or we have an individual who's trying to access being an author. You want to probably change the wheels or the tires in quotes while the car is locked. So it is detected as an unusual event because we will expect you to change the tire or the wheel when the car is unlocked. So it's a detection measure when you look at it, tries to bring people's attention to the asset and therefore remove the element of surprise, the element of quietness, then that will be a preventive measure, as Raju was trying to explain a few minutes ago. So after carefully looking at the alarm system, I realized that you could actually categorize it as a system that, or as a mechanism that falls under both preventive and detective mechanism, depending on your perspective of the asset. Yeah, and that is why I was questioning the comparison between the system, the alarm system, and the bank alarm system, where the alarm system focuses on breaking into the bank. The idea is theft of something that is in the bank, yeah? As opposed to a concept where you want to steal the asset as a unit. Yeah? So we could have the system falling under both categories. Yeah? I hope that more or less settles the discussion. So we looked at a couple of concepts, the CIA triad, additional components that you will look at in security. We looked at the attack surfaces and many other things. Yeah. So we looked at confidentiality of data and privacy, where you determine who can expose the data, means who has access to the data. There is a bit of confidentiality where the information can, the existence of the information can be hid. So if Strathmore did a survey across the staff, looking at the feasibility of online classes, and probably the staff agreed that it's not feasible, but Strathmore denies that the survey took place, then that will be an element of confidentiality, because we will not really have an argument on whether having online classes is feasible or not. We could also have the results posted out there, but only accessible to maybe the management staff. or the management board. So there are a couple of elements in confidentiality. Same for integrity, who has access, who has permissions to modify the data. How is the data modified? For example, when you look at database systems, you have the acidity of transactions, and there is that ability to roll back or roll forward transactions. So by nature, the DBMS tries to avoid incomplete transactions. Sometimes we have read and write locks on records that are probably being read or being written at that particular point. So these are mechanisms that try to ensure integrity by looking at how does the process change the information. And finally, there is integrity of the source. We could have a discussion on car alarm systems, and we have a valid point of view. But when you're doing your discussion, you do your citation, and your citation is from gafla.com, then immediately we question your source of data. Yeah? The data that you have, argument is correct, but the source of the data is questionable. Have the so but modify the data, the source of the data, and how the processes that are allowed to change the data actually change the data. Are they within the access? In terms of who can accept. We looked at policies and mechanisms, and we've looked at the goals of the mechanism. So the next bit is to look at now, before we look at trust and assumptions, we can look at the mechanisms we can have. Okay? So we can have mechanisms that are precise. We can have mechanisms that are secure, and we can have mechanisms that are broad in nature. Hinged on reachable states compared to reachable states. Yeah? Normally, when you look at the policy and what is not. Now, when you break down what is not, you're simply looking at what are some of the states is what is and should not be reachable. Yeah? So if all states are reachable and not all states are secure, then we have a particular blind spot where we can have the system moving to a point that is not secure. So if we have that kind of scenario, then we have a broad kind of mechanism. If we have limitations such that every particular state that the system can move through is actually a secure state, then we have either secure or precise mechanism. So the same number of states that can actually be reached by the system. Yeah? But if the number of states that can be reached by the system is a subset of the secure states, then we more or less have a secure system. We will never have a scenario where you move outside the secure states. Yeah. So we have this kind of representation. Yeah? Sort of mechanism, we have a secure more than the secure states. Yeah? And then of trust and assumptions. Now, I will give an example. One of the most obvious mechanisms that we have in place for simple elements of security is having passwords and passphrases. Secure pass. then we have to assume that no one can actually break into a system without the password. Yeah? So if you use your PC, and what you use to access the PC is a simple passphrase, then the assumption is no one can bypass that that facility that provides a username password combination for the login. Yeah. So there's always an axiom, an assumption that underlies every security measure. Yeah. If we have a lock, we always assume that the lock cannot be picked. Yeah. If we have some biometric system, we assume that we cannot get access to a user who can disable the system. Okay. So this baseline, which we call an axiom, is what we more or less refer to as the assumption. We have an axiom or a baseline that we work with so that we can start implementing security mechanisms. Okay. Now, in reality, you could have a device that is password protected, but by having a good understanding of the operating system, then I could simply get to that password provision application and probably bypass it, get to a different window as opposed to getting that login page. Yeah. Now, for the simple reason that I could go around it, then we cannot really say that having a device that is password protected really provides security for the data that is in that device. Yeah. But because we have to start from a particular point, then we have to make assumptions. Yeah? So that is why we say that assumptions underlie all security mechanisms, all security endeavors. Yeah? Now, there are many assumptions that we make. For example, mechanisms are determined by what the policy says. Yeah. So the policy says I cannot access the AMS, or I cannot do I cannot have write privileges to the AMS if I am not in Strathmore's network. Yeah. So the assumption is no one can actually change the privileges for any user that is not within the network. Yeah. The assumption also is that all security threats that will modify data in the AMS come from without the network, come from users who are accessing the network from outside the university. Well, the reality of the matter is most organizations have more threats coming from the internal users than external users. Yeah? But there are some assumptions that are made. Yeah? So there is an assumption that the policy correctly describes what should happen or what will happen if something wasn't, if a mechanism wasn't implemented. There are also assumptions that the mechanism that has been chosen actually correctly implements what the policy defines. Yeah? So we find that these are assumptions that will always be made with regards to policies and mechanisms. Now, there is an element of trust. Now, if if I have access to your PC is password protected, and I have the ability to either crack your password or bypass the password, then you have to trust that as the owner of the system, a skilled user of the system will not sorry, I have to admit some of you are coming in late. So the skilled users of the system will not use their skills in a wrongful manner, in a manner that will compromise the security of the system. So that is why we always have to consider trust and assumptions, especially from the human element. Yeah, there are things that may not be clear. There are things that might be ambiguous. We could have super users who could do things that are probably be their normal privileges. We could have users who could bypass or could change, but we need to trust that they will work within defined policies. If not, we have mechanisms within the privileges and show who did what with regard to what privileges. So we mentioned something on assurance, and assurance, especially on that bit on policy, is important security in a system. Yeah. So what we do, we in the previous class, is have best practices. We have standards, acceptable standards. We have certification of processes. Yeah. So the specification, the design, and the implementation of the policies should be in a manner that is acceptable, a manner that follows an industry's best practice. Yeah. Additionally, we could have other elements. Yeah. What are some of the compliance regulations or standards that we have to follow in that particular discipline? Yeah. Do we have some standards that determine how we will store user data, probably with regards to credit card information? Do we have standards on how we can store and exchange data in e-health? Yeah. So we have to look at the compliance as well. How well do we follow not just the best practices, but also the regulations that guide that particular discipline? Yeah? Then we have a couple of rational aspects. Yeah? So other than some of what we've mentioned, like compliance and regulations, we have cost-benefit analysis, which looks at do we really need to have some particular mechanisms in place? What is the benefit of having the mechanisms in place as opposed to not having them? Yeah? Then we have an element of risk analysis, which is almost in line with the cost-benefit analysis. But in risk analysis, we look at assets and try to prioritize them. We want to prioritize what mechanisms we should enforce probably first compared to the other. Yeah? If we have a couple of mechanisms, then what is the order of implementation of these mechanisms such that we can achieve the most secure state that we can get to? Yeah? Optimal aspects as well. Yeah. So who determines what that is going to be implemented? Who implements the privileges for a particular system? Yeah. Now, in most enterprises, security mechanisms will be an additional hurdle for normal users up until an incident actually occurs or takes place. Yeah? So in most cases, security investments will not be justified up until a particular loss happens. Yeah? So it's, again, an important point. And especially for normal users, to ensure that they probably follow the guidelines in terms of security, which normally makes their work slightly more difficult, especially for threats that they do not see as important. Yeah? So it's also important to keep this in mind. Generally, to be in line with a principle that we will look at probably in the next lesson, what we call psychological acceptability. We want to make sure the normal users in the enterprise do not consider the mechanism simply a waste of time. Yeah, they have to consider that an element that makes their data probably a bit more safe, their interaction with the system a bit more secure. Yeah. So the threats that an enterprise will be facing will determine the policy. Yeah? So the policy will be that definition document that says we will do A and not B, or A is acceptable and B is not acceptable. Of course, we cannot have a policy that is all inclusive. We will always have some bits that are ambiguous from a practical point of view. Yeah? But ideally speaking, the specification has to be done right. It has to capture all possible elements. Yeah. Another point of trust is you actually have to trust that the policy document captures all the specifications correctly and unambiguously. Yeah. Then the design and implementation are also done in line with the specification. So all subsequent operations and maintenance, operation processes and maintenance processes will come after proper specification, design, and implementation of the policies. Yeah? And the cycle can go on after that through what we will call vulnerability assessment and probably risk analysis over time in an enterprise. Yeah. Something I might have forgotten to mention was on classes of threats. Yeah. So when we were looking at threats, the potential violations, we could look at threats from a couple of perspectives. Yeah. We could look at threats that try to disclose information that should not be disclosed, information that is confidential, yeah, to deceive the potential recipients of the information. Yeah. We could also have threats that aim to disrupt a service. Yeah. Finally, we could have threats that try to take control of a system or a portion of the system. The idea is to try and control the outcome. Yeah. So we could have deception and disclosure. We could have disruption, and we could have usurpation, which is where we try to have control of a system or part of a system. Yeah? So any questions for me so far?
Yeah, if we could just go back to secure, precise, and broad.
Yes, yes.
Saying that Q is a subset of R and all that. Please just go back.
Okay. So normally, if you have a system, you have a set of states that the system can move through. Yeah, from the first point that a user interacts with to the last point. Yeah. Now, if you have these states, if you have all these states, then you could have that as, say, Q, yeah, where Q is a set of all states that the system can go through. Yeah? Now, out of these states, we have states that, according to our policy document, are defined as secure states. You want a user to move from point A to point C and not through point B.
Sorry, could you just turn to the slide where it is? I think the word aid as you explain.
That or the next one?
Yeah, both of them, but let's start from here.
Okay. Now you have, using this example here, our Q, what is our P, yeah? Our set of all reachable states. Yeah, you can move from point A to point B. Yeah, you can, as a normal user, if you move across the system, you could even reset passwords for another normal user. Then you want to look at secure states. Yeah? According to our policy, a normal user should not reset a password for another normal user. So that state is no longer in our set of secure states. Yeah? So Q is a set of secure states. Yeah? So Q is a subset of P, where P is a set of all possible states. Yeah? Then we have the states that when we enforce our mechanisms, the states that the system can actually reach. Yeah. So that we call it R. Yeah. So if the states that the system can reach are in that set of secure states, yeah, so R is a subset of Q, where Q is our set of all possible secure states, then our system is more or less secure because our system moves from point A to point Z, and point A to point Z is a subset of secure states. Yes. Now we have a secure system. Now, if the set of states that our system can move through is exactly the same as the set of secure states, then we have a precise mechanism. Of secure states that are allowed in our policy. Then we have a broad set of states that our system can move through when the mechanism is not equivalent first, or has part of it are not part of Q, where Q is our set of secure states. So our R is partly in Q, and the other part is in P, where P is part of all states. Yeah? So we have a broad type of mechanism, which means the system can move across some insecure states, some states that are not secure. Yeah? So that is what it means to have a broad type of mechanism. Yeah? So a broad type of mechanism will normally allow some set of insecure states. Yeah? In precise, we have a secure states and a mechanism that ensures that all sets of states will be within these secure states in a one-to-one mapping. And the secure one, the first one, is all sets of states for that system will be in the set of secure states, but not in a one-to-one mapping. Okay? So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Tirop, you had a question, Tiffany. So any questions? Class. So in the meantime, you can look at fundamental security principles that inform the design of security in systems or in enterprises. Then we can discuss that first. So unless you have any questions, I think you're free to leave the class. Before you leave, make sure you indicate your in the chat your admission number and your name for your attendance. Sorry, I forgot about that. So what I said you should look at is the fundamental security principles that guide the implementation of security mechanisms in an enterprise. Yeah. The fundamental security principles that guide the design and implementation of security mechanisms in an enterprise. Okay, then once you add your names, then you're free to leave.